The European Union has taken one of its most consequential energy decisions since the start of the war in Ukraine, formally agreeing to ban all imports of Russian gas by the autumn of 2027. The announcement was delivered in Brussels by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, who confirmed that lawmakers and the governments of the 27 EU member states had reached a provisional deal after months of internal negotiations. According to the Commission, the measure will apply to pipeline gas, liquefied natural gas, and other Russian fossil fuel products that have historically supplied a significant share of Europe's energy market. For the past 3 years, ever since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, reducing dependence on Russian energy has remained one of the EU's top strategic priorities. Today's agreement represents the final step in a policy shift that began under emergency conditions. Ursula von der Leyen described the moment as historic. She said, "Today is indeed a historic day for our union. Last night we reached a provisional agreement on the Commission's proposal to fully phase out Russian fossil fuels. We're turning that page and we're turning it for good. This is the dawn of a new era, the era of Europe's full energy independence from Russia." The commitment to eliminate Russian gas imports by 2027 comes after years of gradual reductions. Before the Ukraine war, Russia supplied around 40% of the EU's natural gas. That number has already dropped sharply, but until now, a full prohibition had not been formally adopted. Member states continue to rely on limited volumes of pipeline gas, particularly countries in Central and Eastern Europe, with infrastructure built during past decades of economic cooperation with Moscow. Brussels argues that the new deal will close all remaining pathways, giving governments and industry a clear timeline for restructuring their energy supply chains. Officials say the 2027 deadline is designed to give member states enough time to adapt without causing major disruptions to households or industrial production. The European Commission expects that, as the deadline approaches, the share of Russian gas in the EU market will fall to zero through a combination of alternative imports, expanded renewable energy, modernized electricity grids, and improvements in energy efficiency. The agreement is part of the wider Repower EU framework, launched originally as an emergency response to the war, but now functioning as a long-term strategy to strengthen Europe's security, climate goals, and independence from external suppliers. In Brussels, today's announcement marks the conclusion of negotiations that were technically complex and politically sensitive. Several member states had expressed concerns about whether complete elimination of Russian gas could be achieved without raising energy prices. Others questioned whether the legal mechanism for a ban should be tied to sanctions policy or to broader regulatory reforms. After months of talks, governments and lawmakers appear to have settled on a compromise structure that phases in restrictions gradually while preserving the final cut-off date. Energy analysts note that the EU's move is unusual in its scope. While Western sanctions have targeted Russian oil and coal, gas has always been more difficult to regulate because of long-term contracts, pipeline connections, and the lack of immediate alternatives. The Russian gas ban, once finalized and transposed into EU law, will mark the end of an era in which Russian natural gas was viewed as a stable and predictable resource for Europe's economy. In Moscow, the Kremlin has previously criticized European energy diversification efforts, arguing that it will lead to higher costs. European officials, however, say the decision is necessary to protect both national security and long-term economic stability. The timing of the announcement reflects growing consensus within EU institutions. Over the past year, Russia has increasingly aligned its energy exports with Asian markets, particularly China and India. Meanwhile, European nations have increased LNG imports from the United States, Qatar, and other producers. Expanded capacity at LNG terminals in Germany, the Netherlands, and Southern Europe has significantly reduced the risk of supply shortages. This shift has given policymakers confidence that the remaining dependence on Russia can be phased out in a controlled and predictable manner. Despite the political unity expressed in Brussels, implementation across the EU will require sustained coordination. Some member states that have relied heavily on Russian energy will need to invest in new infrastructure, such as interconnector pipelines, storage facilities, renewable projects, and updated grid capacity. European institutions have indicated that financial support will be available through existing mechanisms, including the recovery and resilience facility and funds allocated for the green transition. In her remarks, Ursula von der Leyen emphasized that the move represents more than an energy policy adjustment. She described it as the beginning of a new stage in European security. Beyond the immediate context of the war in Ukraine, the EU has argued that Russia's historical use of energy supplies as leverage in political negotiations makes long-term reliance on Russian gas incompatible with European strategic interests. The Commission views the 2027 deadline as a realistic end point for breaking what it calls structural vulnerabilities. The reaction from European capitals has been cautiously optimistic. Countries that had long advocated for deeper energy independence, such as Poland and the Baltic states, welcomed the agreement as overdue. These nations have argued that Russian energy revenues have historically enabled Moscow's geopolitical influence and military activities. For them, the ban is not only an economic measure, but also a component of Europe's collective response to the war in Ukraine. Other countries, including Germany and Italy, have signalled that while the transition will require significant adjustments, the political will exists to meet the 2027 deadline without destabilising their industries. Industry groups within the EU have urged policymakers to ensure that the transition remains predictable. Several manufacturing sectors, particularly chemicals, steel and heavy industry, have warned that sudden increases in energy costs could affect competitiveness. However, the European Commission has maintained that the 2027 timeline allows for sufficient planning and that the ongoing expansion of renewable energy will gradually reduce overall dependence on gas. According to internal projections, the combination of renewables, improved storage technologies, and cross-border electricity trade will offset potential shortages in the medium term. The ban also aligns with the EU's climate goals. As the bloc works toward reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 55% by 2030 and achieving climate neutrality by 2050, cutting fossil fuel imports plays a key role in long-term planning. Several governments view the Russian gas ban as an opportunity to accelerate the shift toward wind, solar, hydrogen, and other clean energy technologies. Analysts say that while the transition remains technically challenging, the political momentum behind renewable deployment is stronger now than at any point in the past decade. As the formal legislative process moves ahead, attention will shift to the specific regulations that govern imports, enforcement, possible exemptions, and penalties. Typically, such measures involve coordination between the European Commission, national energy regulators, customs authorities, and private companies responsible for import and storage. Officials say the final text will reflect both technical considerations and geopolitical factors. Once approved, the ban will become binding across all EU member states. Energy security has played a central role in EU policy debates since the early 2000s, but the events of recent years have brought unprecedented urgency. In 2022, shortly after the invasion of Ukraine, Russia reduced gas flows to several European countries, triggering concerns about winter shortages. The EU responded with emergency measures, including mandatory gas storage targets and a coordinated platform for joint gas purchases. Those steps helped stabilize supplies and reduce volatility in the energy market. The new agreement builds on those experiences, integrating them into a long-term framework. The EU's shift is also likely to influence global energy markets by signaling that Europe will no longer rely on Russian gas within 2 years. The bloc is sending a strong message to both producers and investors. LNG suppliers are expected to adjust their strategies to meet long-term European demand. Meanwhile, Russia may accelerate its efforts to redirect gas exports to Asia, though such diversification requires significant infrastructure development. The geopolitical consequences of these shifts will continue to unfold over the coming years. For Ukraine, the EU decision carries symbolic and practical significance. Kyiv has long argued that reducing Europe's dependence on Russian energy is essential to weakening Russia's ability to finance its military operations. Ukrainian officials have consistently urged European governments to adopt stricter sanctions on Russian energy exports. While the new ban is not labeled as a sanctions measure, it will deprive Russia of one of its most reliable and lucrative markets. Analysts say that even though the immediate revenue impact may be limited due to existing reductions, the long-term consequences for Russia's energy sector will be substantial. The announcement comes at a moment when Brussels is preparing for broader strategic discussions about European defence, economic resilience, and relations with global partners. The decision to eliminate Russian gas imports is expected to feature prominently in upcoming EU Council meetings. European leaders have stressed that reducing external dependencies is essential not only in the energy sector, but also in critical minerals, technology supply chains, and defence industries. The gas ban is viewed as part of this broader transformation. Throughout the negotiation process, the European Commission maintained that the proposal was realistic and grounded in the current energy market landscape. Officials highlighted the rapid growth of renewable capacity, particularly offshore wind and solar installations, along with improvements in energy efficiency standards. Several member states have also increased electricity interconnections, allowing more flexible transfers of surplus energy across borders. These trends have created conditions in which the EU considers the 2027 deadline achievable. The Commission President reiterated that today's agreement marks a permanent shift. In her words, "We're turning that page and we're turning it for good." European officials say this statement reflects a determination to ensure that the bloc does not revert to previous patterns of dependence. Over the next 2 years, national governments will be expected to adjust regulatory frameworks, incentivize new energy investments, and strengthen coordination with neighbouring countries. Although the focus of today's announcement is on gas, European institutions are also examining the future of other Russian energy imports. Most Russian oil transported by sea is already banned under earlier sanctions packages, and further restrictions have been imposed on coal and refined products. The new gas ban completes the energy component of the EU's response to the geopolitical challenges triggered by the war in Ukraine. Experts caution that the transition will require careful management, particularly during winter seasons when energy demand is highest. They emphasize that storage levels, supply contracts, and infrastructure resilience will need continuous monitoring. However, they also note that Europe has successfully navigated 2 consecutive winters without major disruptions, despite reduced Russian supplies. This experience, combined with ongoing renewable deployment, has strengthened confidence in the EU's ability to meet the 2027 target. Public reaction within Europe has varied depending on national circumstances. In countries where energy costs remain a sensitive political issue, governments have stressed that the transition will be gradual and supported by state measures. In others, the decision has been widely welcomed as a necessary step for long-term security. Across the continent, media outlets have emphasized the geopolitical significance of ending reliance on Russian gas after decades in which energy cooperation was seen as one of the few stable aspects of EU-Russia relations. The process of translating today's political agreement into formal legislation is expected to proceed rapidly. The European Parliament and the Council will move to finalise the legal text, after which the implementation phase will begin at the national level. EU officials say the goal is to ensure full clarity for companies and consumers well before the 2027 deadline. The significance of the agreement lies not only in its immediate impact, but also in the broader signal it sends about the European Union's strategic direction. The bloc is positioning itself to adapt to a world in which energy security, economic resilience, and geopolitical stability are increasingly intertwined. As Ursula von der Leyen described, this is the dawn of a new era, the era of Europe's full energy independence from Russia. The EU's decision to ban Russian gas by autumn 2027 closes a chapter that has shaped Europe's economic and political landscape for decades. It sets in motion a comprehensive transformation of the continent's energy system, driven by security considerations, climate goals, and a rapidly changing global energy market. With the agreement now reached, the path ahead will focus on implementation, diversification, and long-term stability. The situation remains clear. The European Union has committed to ending its dependence on Russian gas, and the process is now formally underway.